Vice President Kamala Harris visited the Philippine island of Palawan in the South China Sea today. She is spending 3 days in the country, which of course is a U.S. ally central to America's efforts to counter China's assertive stance in the region. Scott Moskowitz joins us now. He is a geopolitical risk analyst for Morning Consult, a decision intelligence company. Good to see you, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
So, the vice president pledged that the United States would defend the Philippines if it were attacked in the South China Sea. Beijing claims most of. So I want to play a little bit of what she said, and let's talk about it after.
An armed attack on the Philippines' armed forces, public vessels, or aircraft in the South China Sea would invoke U.S. mutual defense commitments. And that is an unwavering commitment that we have to the Philippines.
So give us a context of why she made a point to say that for the cameras in public.
Well, to some extent, it's nothing new. We do have this mutual defense commitment with the Philippines, but people often forget about it, and certainly our relationship with them had maybe frayed a little bit under President Duterte over the last few years. But increasingly, there are tensions in the South China Sea area, which China in recent years has claimed more and more of, even though an international tribunal found in favor of the Philippines. That's not something that China claims to regard or respect. So there are tensions in the area over that.
So you mentioned in 2014 there was that defense pact signed by the U.S. and the Philippines. And so now under that, the U.S. is looking to expand, as I understand it, its military presence in the Philippines. What's the strategy there, essentially, Scott?
I think it's competition between the U.S. and China. Given the geography, it's not any surprise that any competition in the region, geopolitical, geostrategic, and military, is going to really play out in terms of the naval sphere. So the Philippines, the region and all its islands, is hugely strategically important for any sort of containment of China and its ambitions in the region.
We mentioned at the top that the United States' relationship with the Philippines is a long one. They've long been an ally. We had a naval base there for many, many years. It was part of the central strategy in the South Pacific during World War II. Just take us through where that relationship is today. You mentioned former President Duterte. There's a new administration now, so I'm wondering what efforts have been made to sort of mend that fraying, as you describe it.
Yeah, certainly Duterte, even though Philippines and China have had these problems specifically over the South China Sea, President Duterte specifically pursued a policy of turning back towards Beijing, and that made the U.S. very uncomfortable, and it raised questions about, China's growing power and influence in the region. But there are increasingly, because of these problems, these territorial conflicts, increasingly, certain nations in the region are wary of China and its investment, the strings that come attached to that. And I think there's a sense that they're looking back towards the U.S., especially with a different administration that is more focused on Asia, is the U.S. recommitting to Asia. And I think this new administration in the Philippines is looking to see that they are.
So this visit comes as tensions, we know, between the U.S. and China are high, especially when it comes to Taiwan. So effectively, what is the statement being made here with this visit by the vice president to the Philippines? How is that likely to be received by the Chinese government?
Yeah, well, tensions have certainly been high over the last few months. That's something we track. We've seen them going up and up. Although recently with Biden and Xi's meeting, there was really an attempt on both sides to kind of draw a floor under spiraling relations, to renew a commitment to high-level dialogue, many things that had been cut off after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August. And so it's very key. You'll notice that Harris is going to Palawan, which is near a contested area, but is not a contested area itself, and it allows them to project their commitment to the Philippines and their strength without sort of crossing any red lines, which allows China also to say, okay, we don't have to be too offended by this, while recognizing that it is a projection of strength.
Right. Yeah. Essentially going right up to the line, making very clear they're there, but not crossing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what does your research show about how ordinary Filipinos think about this? I mean, the notion of rapprochement with China, where there's a huge population here in the United States of Filipino Americans, and I wonder if the rapprochement that Duterte pursued with China was something that was seen as a positive by Filipinos or negative.
Yeah, we've seen that. He is, Duterte, I think that was seen as somewhat of a negative. We've seen Bongbong has been that's a new President Marcos, has been
Yeah,
fairly popular.
his nickname.
Yes. Very
So for people who are wondering.
Yes. Bong Bong is in fact the reference to the current Filipino president. Yes.
Sorry. President Marcos, we've seen he's been fairly popular so far. So the turn back to the U.S., I think it caught people off guard, the move back towards China, because as you mentioned at the top of the segment, the Philippines and the U.S. have such a long, strong, consistent history, and there are so many Filipinos in the United States. There are so many ties, both militarily, economic. So I think people were surprised at this kind of new order, and I think there's a little comfort in turning back towards older allies.
But, so what is China offering? In other words, when you are courting, and you mentioned this relationship that the United States has with the Philippine government, what's the alternative that China is proposing?
China offers money. They offer a lot of investment. They offer a lot of investment in things like infrastructure. And some of the things they say is, oh, ours is no strings attached. But as we've seen more recently, there are a lot of strings attached. Oftentimes it comes with these sort of debt traps. And we see that, almost some people have postulated it's a play to sort of take over some of these things and create just this sprawling Chinese-controlled infrastructure in the region, which would really give them a sort of geostrategic superiority over certain spheres.
It'll be really interesting to see how this develops, because there are some Filipinos as well, even the Philippines, who don't necessarily want the American presence expanded, because there's long and complicated history, which we don't have time to get into now, but we'll be watching it closely. Scott Moskowitz. Scott, thank you.
Thank you.